So we're discussing over here about the two levels of the neshamas. There is the neshamas that are considered like the neshamas that are considered like creatures of the ocean, which means that they are covered and you don't see by them the source of chayis. That means that um, you don't see openly they're being a Metzias. They're like bottle. They're in the water bottle and subjugated to Hashem. And then you have the ones that Yabasha. We'll explain. So he says like this: Ois Gimel. Hine al pi biur hachiluk shebein bruyim shebeyam lebruyim shebeyabasha. So based upon the explanation that we have the difference between those creations that are in the sea and those creations that are in the dry land. Sheberuyim shebiyabosha nirim leyesh v'dovor nifrod bifnei atzma. That the creations of the dry land, they appear to be an entity and something separate by themselves, which means independent of the source. That's what it means, that they come across as independent. They're not bottled, they're not subjugated to godliness. That's the Beruyim creation of the Abosha. Be'ilu habruyim shebiyam einom nidim mitzias bifnei atzmam. On the other hand, the creations of the ocean do not appear to be an entity by themselves. They're covered by the sea, so you don't see them. They don't appear. And that represents the level of creations that you can tell that they are subjugated to Hashem. They don't appear to be independent. They're always connected, just like the fish in the water. They're always in the water, in the source of life. As soon as they leave, there's no existence. So their existence is constantly felt. They feel their source. Elohim betelim betachlis limekor chayusam. They are totally subjugated to the source of the light. So this distinction of the level of bittul that creates in the creations of the sea and the difference between the creation of the dry land, this explains the Maimer, a problem, a question that we have in Shara Yichud V'Hamuna that the Rebbe is going to address now. The idea that we're having over here, that here we have creations, but they're in the Yam. What does creation of the Yam mean? It means that they are emetzias, but yet they're not an independent metzias. This will explain to us the meaning in Shara Yichud Ve'amuna. So it brings down now like this: Betaretz b'hamaimer. And the Maimer, he answers hastira, the contradiction, shemoitzim l'ch'oire b'Shara Yichud Ve'amuna, that seemingly we find in Shara Yichud Ve'amuna, we find a contradiction. So he says like this: the Hine, the Perek Gimel, in the third Perek of Shara Yichud Ve'amuna, Mevur. Over there he explains Eich Shekol Nivra V'Yesh Hu Be'emes Nechshav La'ayin Ve'efes Mamish. Over there he explains that every creation, every entity, is in essence truly considered to be nothing and zero, actual zero, nothing. Everything that was created is really zero, is really ephes, is garnished. There's nothing there. If you measure it, legabe koyach hapoyel v'ruach piv shebenifo. If you measure it, there is the power that works, and the ruach piv, the creation that comes, Hashem beruach piv kol tzvom, the Eibishter's power of the ruach piv that is in the created being, that creates him constantly, and he brings him out from ex nihilo, from nothingness, mamish to yesh. So you have the power of the Eibishter, which creates everything, and then you have the created being, that which has been created. If you measure the created being, what was created, relative to the power that creates it, so then it's considered like nothing, because the created being, the Gashmi is the what was created, the entity was created, constantly needs that power of that brings it into life, and the Ruach Piv to constantly be there. So there is no independence at all. There is no real entity at all. There's no real existence over there, because the created being, needs that power to always be there to create it. There's not even any room for any independence of any being, a metzias, an entity on its own. It needs that power that works in it, the Ruach Piv, to constantly create it. So if you measure the created item relative to the force that creates it, it's considered like nothing. And further he says, V'ilu nitno reshus la'ayin lidois ulahasik esachayis v'haruchniyus shebechol nivrachulu. Had there been permission given for the eye to see and to understand, to grasp the vitality and the spirituality that in all creation, what we see the physicality, we see the creation, we see the material that has been created. We don't see the power, the vitality, the spirituality that brings it into being. Had there been given permission, which means had Hashem allowed for us to see and to grasp that spiritual component of every physical thing that we see, that vitality, the spirituality of the Nivra, which brings him into existence, Loi hoyo gashmius hanivra v'chumrei umamoshe. So then the physicality of the creation and its materialism and its substance, the gashmius nida klali einenu, we would not see it at all for our eyes. We could not see that Gashmius at all, because all what we would see is the Ruchnius, the Gashmius, the materialism, the physicality, the substance would be totally subjugated, would be non-existence, had we be able to see that spiritual component that gives it the life. Kihu botl b'metzias mamesh legabe hachayis v'aruchnius shaboy, because the materialism, the physicality of the created being is totally subjugated. It's not existence when you measure it relative to the vitality and the spiritual. We don't see. The reason why we see Gashmi is because we don't see that component, that part, that spiritual part that vitalizes it. But had we given the opportunity, the right to see the Gashmias, then it would not have been existent. We would see no existence. It would be totally bottled. Since without the spirituality, because without that spiritual chayis, the materialism, the existence that we see would have been null and void and nothing and zero mamish k'moi koidem sheishis yemei bereshis mamish, just like before the 6 days of creation mamish. Meaning, just like before the Eibishter created anything before sheishis yemei bereshis, there was nothing there. And the same thing is, after the creation, there still would be nothing there if we can see the spiritual part of the creation. The thing is, the reason why we see the world as something is because we don't see that spiritual part. But had we been able to see and grasp and understand that spiritual part of creation, of all the created beings, then we would not have any creations. So the way the Rebbe understands this now, that in the Maimer explains, the way we understand what the Alter Rebbe is saying now, that there would literally be no existence at all from the creation had there not been that symptom of not allowing us to see the created being. So that means that because from the perspective of creation, there would be no existence, just like before Sheishis Mebreshis. The Rebbe is going to explain that what it means over here, it doesn't mean fully, because this seems to conflict with the other part that the Alter Rebbe writes in chapter 4. The Rebbe is going to explain it doesn't mean that they would be non-existence, but what it means here, it would be like the creatures of the ocean. Let's look inside. The Ilu, the Perek Daled, but then on the other hand, when we come to the 4th chapter in Shara Yichud V'Amunah, the Inyan Sidur Shvochav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, over there, when we organize the praise that we say about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so what do we say? Hagodel Hagiber V'Hanoiro, Keil Hagodel Hagiber V'Hanoiro. What is the meaning? The Alter Rebbe explains, and we say the great God. And what does it mean, the powerful God? What is the Godel? What is the great? And what is the giver? What is the strength? What are the two things? The Rebbe explains Mavuer over there, Shehagodel he midas chesed. Godel, that is the measure of Hashem's kindness. That's the big, the Godel, the big, it expands. Hashem's kindness is Godel, is great, is big, because it expands everywhere. He midas chesed v'his pashtus hachayis b'chol ha'olamos ubruim. That energy, that vitality expands to all the world, all the creations. That's the level of chesed, le'ein kates v'tachlis, to no end, to no completion. It goes, the Eibishter's chesed, that's why it's godel. It keeps on going, because all of the creations of the all different creations, you have all multi levels of different created beings, and all the creation, everything comes from that level of godel, from the level of chesed. Ki godel havaya, because we say in the pasuk Hashem is great, and there is no really investigating and understanding the greatness, how far it expands. Ein cheker, v'lochein mashpia gamkein. This is all in the 4th perek over there in Shara Yichud V'Amunah, and that's why he also gives a flow gamkein chayis v'his havus me'ayin liyesh le'olamos ubruim ein ketz. And that's why he gives a vitality, and he creates from ex nihilo into existence, from nothingness into existence, le'olamos ubruim ein ketz, to worlds and creations unlimited. So the explains that. What does it mean when we say Okel HaGodel? We say that the Eibishter, who is infinite, gives infinite chayis to infinite level of creations. All of the creation, there is no limit to that, and it keeps on creating everything from ex nihilo, from nothingness into existence. That's Hagodl. What's the Giber? What's the Giber? Umidas gvurose shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu hi midas hatzimtzum. So the measure of Hashem's strength, that is the measure of restriction. That is to restrict. Hagodl is to expand. Hagiber is to restrict. Shehachayis mistater beguf hanivra. That the vitality hides in the body of the created being. That comes from the level of Gevura. Gevura creates a restriction that it restricts the visibility of the Gedula of the Ebershter's Chayes. Uki'ilu guf hanivra hu davar bifnei atzmei. And as if to say that the body of the created being is independent. You can't tell that it comes from the Ebershter. So there's two impacts. There is the impact of Chesed, which is the Chayis, and then you have the impact of Gevura to hide it from the created being, so that the created being sees itself as independent, doesn't appreciate the fact, doesn't realize that it's being constantly fueled from the Ebershter, and it sees by itself. So the Rebbe says this second statement seems to be contradicting what we said before. B'lechere sasri ahadodi. L'chayre would seem that they contradict each other. Shaharei b'peiri gimel mashma. In the third chapter, it appears sheis galus hachayus, that the revealing of this energy, as he said, ilu nitna reshus la'ayin liris, that vitality, this chesed we're talking about, this gedula that we're talking about, that this revelation, had you been able to see it, poeles bitl mitzias habriya, that impacts a negation of the existence of creation, because you're saying that the chayis would be so powerful that chayis would not does not allow for any entity. Everything would be bottled. But the ilu bepedik daled mashma leipach. But in the fourth chapter, it comes out the other way around, the opposite lechayda. Shehis galus hachayis, that the revelation of this energy, because ligdulose and cheker midas chesed v'hispashtus hachayis, the measure of chesed and expanded chayis, hikiyum mitziusom shel kol hanivroim ayin liyesh. That is the sustaining of the existence of all creations from nothing to existence. That's the spashtus of the gedula of that chayis to create everything. In the Peirik Gimel, he says that if the chayis is revealed, then the worlds can't exist. Peirik Dalet, it says that from the expansion of the level of chesed, that is how everything does expand. Shaharei hashpoas chayis v'izhavus ma'ayin liyesh la'olamos ubruyim ein ketz. The flow of vitality, what creates everything from nothingness to existence, to the worlds and the creations that are unlimited, einoi elam midas hachesed. That's the midas hachesed creates everything. That is the only created is midas hachesed, and the midas hachesed expands to create unlimited creation. Be'ilu ha'elam v'ha'ester. On the other hand, what blocks and what obscures that you cannot see the humitzad midas hagavura? That comes from the measure of the strength of restriction. upu ulose hirak, but the Gevura doesn't create anything. All what the act of Gevura, what it does is shahanirgash yurgash ledavar bifnei atzmai. He impacts. Gevura accomplishes what it impacts is that the created being should sense as an entity by itself. In Cain, so it turns out, if so, gam behosir hatzimtzum v'hester shemitzad midas hagevura. If you remove that restriction that comes from the measure of gevura, so os tiyes galus hachayis, then it would be the revelation of the chayis. Yikiyum umetzias amiti l'chol hanivroim ayin liyesh. They will have the real existence. They're not going to have a restricted existence, which comes from Gevura. If you just leave it at Chesed without getting a Gevura, you have the real existence. Beloi kifi shemashma bePeri Gimel, not as it appears in the Peri Gimel, shebizgalus hachayis tizbatl metzias hanivroim. That when the vitality is revealed, then there is no existence of created beings. So basically, in Perek Gimel, it says that the revelation of the Chayis would bring about the negation of the existence. And in Perek Dalet, it seems that the Chayis is what brings the true existence to everything. Okay, you bring in the level of Gevura to give them entity feeling, but it doesn't sound like the Gedula itself, the Ashpos Achayis, would make it non-entity. What does the Chayis, the expansion of Chayis, makes an entity or it makes a non-entity? In the Perek Gimel, it seems that it takes away the Metzias because of the revelation of the great light. In the Perek Dalet, it seems that it is the Chayis, the Gedula, that would give life to even the furthest creatures. So, how do we explain this? Yuvon al pi hamavur li'il, we can extend this based on what we said earlier, b'hachiluk shebein bruyim shebeyabosha lebruyim shebeyam. In the difference that we learn between the created beings that are in the dry land and the created being that are in the sea. Shebruyim shebeyabosha nirim metzias b'fnei atzmo. The created being in the dry land, so they're both created beings. They're both creations, but the creations that are in the dry land, they appear independent entities. As opposed to the created being that are in the sea, their entity is subjugated and covered by the water of the ocean. And this is also the meaning, the explanation, what it says in the third chapter. Had there been given permission for the eye to see, so when it says over here that the physicality of the creation would be totally bottled, he doesn't mean bottled non-existent, but it means it would be bottled like the creation of the Yam. She'ein hakavona doesn't mean shabahosir hatzimtzum, that when you remove the tzimtzum, yiyah heder mitzias hanivroim, there's going to be no more existence of nivroim if there's no tzimtzum. Ois mitzias, meaning no existence. That's not what it means. Ayin va'efes mamash k'mashoishes yemei Bereshis mamash, to be actually like nothing like before the creations of the sixth day. Ki'im, what he means is shemitzias hanivroim, tia betachlis habitl legabe mekoida. But he means that the existence of the creation would be totally subjugated. It's not non-existent, but it's going to be totally subjugated legabe mekoida. Doesn't mean that it's going to be like before Sheish Mebreshis, but it's going to be bittel veltusor kemoi oir hashemesh kshu beguf kader hashemesh. Just like the light of the sun when it is in the actual ball of the sun. So the shine that comes from the sun before it comes out of the sun, as it is inside of the globe of the sun, Shabbatul b'mitzias. It has no existence over there. It's negated. V'nechshav la'ayin v'efes mamish, as considered like nothing. That's in the Perek Gimel Kavur Shom Hemshecha Inyan, as explained over there. So we're not talking about that there's not going to be the oir. We're talking about that the oir isn't going to be nechshav. It's not going to be a metzias. B'hainu shebahasoras hatzimtzum yiu kol hanivroyim b'teilim b'metzias legabe mekoidom. That when you remove the tzimtzum, it's not that they're not going to exist, but they're going to be subjugated with their entity, legabe mekoidom, relative to their source, b'dugmas bruyim shebiyam, similar to the bruyim shebiyam, she'ein mitziusam niris, that does not appear, kivun shebetelo mechusa b'meyayom, because it is subjugated and covered by the water of the sea, kimayim layom achasim, like water that covers the sea. So he is explaining here that when it says in Perek Gimel that would be not an entity, it doesn't mean that they're actually going to cease from being existent, from their existence, but it means that they're going to be they're going to be like in the Yam. But one thing, what I'm trying to understand over here, in the Perek Gimel that the Rebbe quotes over here, it says, "V'ilu nitno reshus la'ayin liris la'asik." So then it says, "Baruch Shabai, ma'ach shebelade shemibelade haruchnius hoya ayin v'efes mamish k'mei breshis." So he actually says they would be, without the spirituality, they would be bottled just like before the 6 days that they were created. So we have to, the Rebbe explains it, that would be the level of mitzias, of their bittel, but it doesn't mean that they will cease to exist, because no, it would only be an existence. It's not going to be a non-existence, but it's going to be a bitteldike existence. In a bitteldike existence and a non-mitzias existence. It's not that it's not going to be. It's not like it's going to be like before the Sheishis Mebreshis. The bittel is without the ruchnias, and this causes is a bittel. But it's not that it doesn't exist. It continues to exist. In Perek Daled, everything will exist from the light, but it will be a non-existent existence, so to speak. It will be a non-mitziasdike existence. It will be a bitteldike existence. Just like Nivroim Biyam, they exist. But they don't feel themselves a Metzias, and they're covered by the Yam. And now the Rebbe will explain that Neshamas Yisrael, the Neshama, before it comes down into this world, lives like the creatures of the sea, because it's all surrounded by godliness, and it doesn't feel itself as a independent Metzias at all. It's totally bottled. But after the neshama comes down into this world, into Olam Hazar, so over there it feels itself as an independent mitzias. It becomes like a Yabosha Dika mitzias, And there you have the different level of bittul to subjugate yourself to Hashem, as the Rebbe will continue to learn in the Maimer. We will mamshich in Maimer. Okay, leave it over here.
Okay. See you next time. Bye bye. Thank you.